Joining me now from Winnipeg, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence. The NDP Foreign Affairs critic Paul Dewar is with me in Ottawa, and the Liberal International Trade critic Chrystia Freeland is holding down the fort in Fort York. All right, thanks to all of you three for coming in today. Mr. Bezan, I'll start with you. What's the rationale? Just tell us the rationale. Why Canada now decided to send 200 military personnel to train the Ukrainians?
Well, as you know, Evan, some time ago we announced that we were signing on to the U.S.-Ukraine Joint Commission on Military Reform and Cooperation, and this is another step in the direction of helping Ukraine's military to become more able to increase their capacity and deal with the ongoing aggression that we see from the Putin regime in eastern Ukraine and Crimea.
Mr. Bezan, this is not a NATO mission. This is not Operation Reassurance. Why not bring this to Parliament? Obviously, there's going to be concerns about that. Why does the government, you have the right to do it, absolutely, but why not talk to Parliament first?
Well, we do training missions all the time around the world. This is a big one, I'll give you that. But at the same time, they're well removed from the front lines, over 1,300 kilometers away from eastern Ukraine. They're only a few kilometers from the Polish border. It is a brand new facility that we're doing training in, which we helped develop with the Americans several years ago. And I also want to stress that none of our troops are going to be armed. So they're there strictly in a training role. 150 of them will be doing individual and tactical training with units. And we'll also be doing stuff in dealing with improvised explosive devices, in medical training and dealing with how they deal with trauma at the front, and so training those medics, dealing with things like flight safety training. So all these things are part and parcel and important to ensure the success rate of the Ukrainian military and also improve their own chances to survive.
Let me bring in Paul Dewar on that. What do you make of it? The decision to do it, and you know, they're out of harm's way, they're training, they're not armed, although I should say the Americans have light arms, the Canadians won't. What's your take on this?
Well, look, we actually go back to what the Prime Minister had said before he was Prime Minister and soon after, was that when we're deploying large numbers of military or military into situations that aren't normal, and James is right, we do training all the time, but this is above and beyond our normal commitment within NATO, for instance, that we should bring this in front of Parliament. And exactly the point that is being made right now is, what's it about? I note that in the case of Iraq, we were told they won't be on the front lines, and that changed as things went on. So I think this is a very dangerous area. I mean, we know what's going on in the east of Ukraine. We want to make sure that it's absolutely clear to Canadians, and therefore having a debate and a vote in Parliament, I think, is a sanguine thing to do. It's a responsible thing to do.
Would the NDP support having troops there?
Well, we want to look exactly, and we're hearing now from government what it's about, and so we're digesting that. You know, initially no opposition to the idea. Look, Ukraine needs numerous things. One is helping with governance. There's a lot of corruption still. There's need to have oversight in terms of all sorts of aspects to institutions. One of them is the military. So no, we're not opposed to that, but we want to make sure that there's a full debate and we have a vote on this.
Chrystia Freeland, you know this area well. What's your take? Is this the responsible thing to do?
It is, and we support it. You know, it's important. I know maybe sometimes disappointing to people who like to watch sparring on TV, but it's important for us not to make every single thing a partisan issue. And in the view of the Liberal Party, support for Ukraine is not a partisan issue for us. We don't think it's a partisan issue for Canadians. Canadians support Ukraine. They support democracy. This is the right thing to do. These Canadian troops are very far away from the front lines. I mean, to make clear, Yavoriev is in a place where I'm thinking of sending my kids to summer camp. It's a very safe area, and it's a really important both practical step and symbolic step. It's important for Canada to show that we are supportive of Ukraine, and our troops are really, really good at training. I'm glad they're going to be there.
But the question is, do the Russians view this as a provocation? Our colleagues at CBC Radio's As It Happens spoke to Vyacheslav Nikhanov, the chairman of the Russian State Duma Committee on Education today. Listen to his response to Canada's announcement today. Check this out.
Sending more troops there or training this Ukrainian army for the purposes of killing their citizens better than before, this is not the best message.
that full interview tonight on As It Happens with Carol Off. You can hear that. But I'll start with you again, Christine Freeland. What do you make of that? That they view this clearly as a, could they view this as a provocation? Could this lead to an escalation?
Well, I've interviewed Vyacheslav Nikonov many times, and he has certainly become less liberal as the times have changed in Russia. Look, first of all, it's important to note that U.S. and U.K. troops are there already. I hardly think the addition of some Canadian troops is going to tip Russia over the edge. Secondly, I think it's very important to be clear about facts and not to let Nikonov's statement that we are training Ukrainian troops to shoot their own citizens. We are training Ukrainian troops to defend themselves and to defend their country, and it's important to make that clear. Finally, and this is really a crucial point about Putin, Putin is someone, and we have seen this time and again, who is not provoked by strength. He's provoked by weakness. Failure to support Ukraine is a more dangerous strategy than supporting Ukraine. And I think really, actually, our main focus needs to be on supporting Ukraine economically.
Paul Dewar wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I don't disagree. One of the concerns I have, though, is that we don't take the bait. So when we hear points of view from the Duma or from Putin himself, sometimes there's a reaction to, you know, give it back as good as we're getting, or fall into the trap of this is going to do that. I think we have to be smart. I think we have to be clear about what our mission is and show by example that clearly this isn't a threat to anyone, that everything we do in Ukraine is to help the people of Ukraine. And that's where I think we have to shift. I don't disagree with Ms. Freeland in terms of what their consensus is generally, but I think in terms of how we approach this sometimes, we might need to change the tone. And so I don't fall into any Russian traps. You know, I'm on the banned list like others, all that stuff. But what we have to do is be clear about our message. This is to help the people of Ukraine, and we need to say that time and time again.
I got less than a minute here, Mr. Bezan. $13 million for the first year, $3 million contingency fund. The real question is this it? In other words, where is this headed? Is this the beginning of a deeper involvement with Ukraine? Will we extend? Have you ruled out, for example, providing Ukrainian military with lethal weapons? Where could this lead?
Well, as was mentioned this morning in the press conference, that the Prime Minister has had discussions, of course, with our allies, Angela Merkel in particular, and President Obama, and we will not be going down that path unilaterally. That's something that has to be considered by the coalition. But you know, ultimately, this comes back to President Putin, that him and his regime have a chance to de-escalate the tension. And as Krista just pointed out, you know, we have to make sure that we are matching what they're doing in eastern Ukraine, because you know, they think of this like a chess game, and we have to be at an area that we can deter them from going any further than they have now. And they are doing training in eastern Ukraine. They do have command and control on the ground, as well as supplying the separatists and their proxy army that they have there.
All right, I got to leave it there. James Bezan, Paul Dewar, Christian Freeland, I appreciate your time today as Canada commits 200 troops to training exercises, and not just exercise, to the training mission in Ukraine. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great to be with you.